I don't think God is asking us to wait like we're in a waiting room for heaven. Mm-hmm. He's to be found here and he's to be found now. And our home is in him, but our home is also a really physical and practical and everyday kind of a thing too.
Welcome everybody, this is Simon Gilbert with Inspired. It's great to be back with you again. There's so much heavy stuff going on in the world right now, and I suppose the aim of this podcast is just to share beautiful stories from all sorts of different walks of life, from friends of mine who have sort of shown triumph and overcoming faith through difficult experiences, or how the Lord's used in just very different ways. So I love it, the range of people we've had in, and this week I'm thrilled to have with us Jo Swinney. Welcome, Jo.
Thank you, Simon. Thank you for having me.
Great to have you. And we can just hear the dim echoes of screams of joy of the primary school across the road from you as they're on their break time. So Jo lives probably as the crow flies about 500 yards from us. She's in a prayer triplet with my wife Lizzie. I pray with her husband Sean, who is our local vicar. Daughters Alexa and Grace are good buddies. Jo is the author of about, is it 10 books?
Oh, no, I think it's 8, maybe.
All right, 8.
Not very good at counting.
Maybe 10 in another couple of years. She's the director of communications for A Rocha International, which is an international network of environmental organisations with a Christian ethos. And yeah, I'm really excited to hear what we're going to unpack together, Jo. So listen, I know you had an unusual childhood. Why don't we kick off there? Go for it.
Yeah, I share my childhood with only 3 other humans in the world, my siblings. Mm-hmm. In Portugal, in southern Portugal, at the first A Rocha Field Study Centre. So with our family and anything from, I guess, 5 to 30 extras around the dinner table each evening, and lots of interesting things going on, from bird ringing to mapping and discovering new orchids to picking and cracking open all the almonds from the garden. Yeah, just a lot of time outside and with a huge variety of different people from around the world. Our family added on to our family at any given time.
I find that concept of just having loads of people around. I mean, we've usually had someone living with us. We love sort of extended family and modelling that. So community living is great. I mean, it's not everyone's cup of tea, but I certainly love it. Now, your family well, you've got a real heritage, haven't you? So why are your parents well known? What do they do?
They've tried very hard not to be well known. Mm-hmm. But I think their work has become really well known. So back in 1983, they founded with another family this organisation, A Rocha, which is essentially showing God's love for all of creation, looking to do small, local, restorative conservation projects, but also mobilise the church and get stuck into the secular conservation world, where Christians are actually often blamed, sometimes quite rightly, for some of the worst damage done to the world. So at the time, it was very, very strange and cutting edge. I think things have changed substantially in the nearly 40 years that it's been going, and it's gone from one project in Portugal to 22 organisations around the world, and another 40 countries in the pipeline to join. So.
Great. Yeah. And for you, what are the sort of defining experiences from your Portugal childhood?
Defining experiences, I would say, would include some really intense and lovely friendships with people of all ages. And that came with some very painful goodbyes, because people tended to be with us relatively short term. Mm-hmm. Going to the international school in the Algarve was a bit like the Wild West at the time, so pretty rough and ready experience of school, some quite severe bullying for me, and counteracted, I guess, with a very full and colourful home life. I would say that we had a huge amount of freedom to roam and a gorgeous place to grow up in, so very standard to all pile off to the beach after school in the summer months, and just a big amount of space to roam in and make dens and find little nooks with your book and that kind of thing. So I'm really grateful for that, and realise that that's quite unusual. Now I've met people who had more standard upbringings. Being a foreigner, being not actually, belonging to a degree in the country you feel at home in, but knowing you don't quite, and stick like with our blonde heads just sticking out like a sore thumb everywhere we went was strange, I suppose.
So was it somewhat schizophrenic, happy home life and miserable school life?
Yeah, that's a good summary.
And you've talked and you've written about mental health issues. Did depression already sort of kick in at that stage?
I don't think it did. I had highs and lows, but depression is a very different territory. I don't think I had any experience of not your normal kind of sad, angry, healthy range of emotions until I was in my first term at boarding school in England when I was 13. And I wouldn't have known to name it that until much later.
So, go on. Let's explore that. What did that look like? How did that manifest?
I suppose looking back, it was like something in my bloodstream is kind of that pervasive, just a feeling of blackness that went seamlessly inside to outside. So it began with some probably rational reactions to some things that were happening, culture shock and homesickness and teething problems socially, that kind of thing. But I remember about, 2-3 weeks in, just going quite numb and losing a sense of the past or the future, just being very stuck in the moment, feeling absolutely hopeless and black. And I used to sort of try and like, this is a bit of a gross analogy, but when you have like a big painful spot and you can try and like, you think that once you get to the point, if you can find a point to it and squeeze it, it might ease it. So I remember trying to like squeeze out tears and thinking if I had a really good cry, maybe that would kind of leach away the general feeling of ickiness, but it didn't. There's lots of metaphors for depression. It's very difficult to put words to it, really, though. And I think at that first time, it probably went on for the worst of it, maybe 6-8 months, something like that. And my mum, when I went home for Christmas, she wrote me this letter that I was sort of to pray to God. And looking back, it was kind of like a CBT, like cognitive behavioral therapy approach, where you just try and reshape your thoughts so that then your feelings are changed and then your behavior is changed, and it's kind of this virtuous triangle. So she wrote me this prayer where I was to affirm lots of truth about God's love for me and who I was as a person, and praying for the people who were being really unkind to me, and a list of the people who loved me and that kind of thing. And I would just go through it, 10-20 times a day. I still have it. It's very dog-eared and tear-marked, but I think in that first episode, that was the ladder I used to climb out of it.
So you weren't hiding it from, at least Mum knew it was out in the open.
I used to write them letters. This was like in the olden days. So no email, no phone, no phone over the internet. I used to disappear off for 4 months, and not hear their voices. And my letters would take 2 weeks and cross each other. And I knew that they wanted me to be happy and that my sadness caused them pain. So I remember writing one fairly kind of drastic letter, and then after that putting a brave face on as best I could. And I think I felt that no one really knew quite how awful I felt. Apart from this one day, there were these gorgeous sixth formers, people in their last year of school in my house who were Christians and just absolutely gorgeous. And I remember one afternoon not showing up for my sports session because one of them had found me in a puddle and was looking after me. And it turned out there was this kind of school-wide search, and these girls who had, I mean, in my memory, I don't really remember them being that bad because, as I say, by that point, it just become a thing in itself, really. The depression was just the problem rather than people. But these girls who had been mean were in histrionics kind of saying, oh, she's killed herself because we've been mean. And we can't find her. And there was this big drama going on. So people obviously did know I was quite profoundly unhappy. It just didn't really get through to me.
I wonder how much, I suppose it's just conjecture in terms of how much it was sort of catalysed or exacerbated by being at boarding school. I don't know if you come across Mark Stibbe's book, Home at Last, Freedom from Boarding School, but he was a chap, he was dropped off at boarding school on his 8th birthday, having been adopted. So he felt like it was a second orphaning, if you like, and he was beaten that night on his birthday, and he's beaten 4 times in the first 2 weeks. And he talks about this concept of boarding up his heart, and just had a miserable experience. Now, I went to boarding school when I was 10. So interestingly enough, our family all went to boarding school. My dad went to boarding school when he was 4 in Central Africa. And later on, he had a 3-year period of not seeing his parents at all. So that book has done the rounds in our family because we've all experienced boarding school. Now, I absolutely loved it. For me, it was, I'm good at sport, and it had a slightly skewed value system, but, the sports people got the most kudos. So I loved it. But, did your siblings similarly suffer, or was it just you?
Well, I think it is worth saying that it isn't, across the board, it's not necessarily a damaging experience. And some people have very unhappy home lives, and it's a complete lifesaver. And some people have really amazing friendships. And like you said, if you're good at sport, it's a bit of a dream. And so, yeah, I think my siblings, had overall probably happier experiences to me. They were in a different school. They're different people. They had different groups of people in their year groups who were maybe less troublesome. I don't know. I think it's difficult to say, isn't it?
Sure.
I think what happened with the depression was that throughout school, I kind of went in and out of it. University, similarly, went off to Canada to study for a master's in theology. And North America at that point was pretty open about mental health things compared to the UK. So pretty soon I was encouraged quite broadly to go and get some help. And I ended up seeing this amazing psychiatrist, Catholic Christian psychiatrist, for 3 years, covered by my amazing health insurance. And she diagnosed me with something called dysthymia, which is long-term chronic low-grade depression interspersed with episodes of major depression.
Right.
And the thing that we worked most on together was integrating difficult emotions and feelings into, like, filing them appropriately in my mind.
Sure.
And I suppose one of the things that people say about women in particular, that depression can be anger turned inwards.
Right.
So that's the thing that we worked most on, and that I continue to have to work hardest on, is recognizing anger in myself and then choosing the appropriate behavior once I let myself feel it. I think that might be a Christian issue too, because we have this kind of mistaken idea that Christians are supposed to be nice, and that nice equates to sort of generic sunnyish disposition. Yeah.
Which is why I think your writing and addressing it and being open about it is really valuable. And I really appreciate you doing it. So that's just a constant ongoing battle then, and you've accepted that. Is that right?
I've made a lot of progress, and I'm on medication still, and grateful for that. And I don't experience depression any given year. And even we might come on to talking in a minute, but there's been some really difficult things over the last 2-3 years, and I haven't gone into depression, which feels sort of vaguely miraculous.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm aware of it like a fragility, like how if you broke a bone, you might be more liable to break that bone in the same place. So it remains a fragility for me, and I work hard not to fall back into depression. But I don't live my life with it as a constant reality.
That's great. So I've read 2 of your 8 books, and I think the one that you'd be best known for, which genuinely, folks, I'm not just saying it to butter up Joe here, is absolutely brilliant. So it's called Home, The Quest to Belong. And I'll just read out the blurb on it. Where is home? This question troubles many of us. We may live far from where we grew up, away from those we love, or in a culture not our own, but we all need somewhere to belong, to find a sense of home in this world. Well, Jo Swinney was born in the UK, but grew up in Portugal and France. She went to an English boarding school, did a gap year in Southern Africa, and in her 20s studied theology in Canada, where she met her American husband. And now she's back in the UK, and she's had more reason than most to wonder what home really means. That's a lot of different journeys and travels. I was born in England. I lived in Algeria for 2.5 years, France for 6 years, South Africa was my year off, Germany for 6 months, Rwanda 6 months, Burundi 20 years, America 2 years. So, we both had very sort of peripatetic lives, and so it just really hit me. Is home where you come from, where you live now, where the people you love are, or what? So, in this book, again, I'm just quoting you, interweaving a frank and poignant retelling of her own story with theological and psychological insights, Jo's original and authentic exploration of home in all its many and varied forms is a heartfelt call to find our home in the things that are truly of most value. So I am plugging that because, when you read a book that impacts you, you want to share it with other people. But Jo, clearly that came from all the stuff you've been through, but, just take a few minutes to explore that with us.
Well, first of all, thank you, Simon. That's really kind of you. And I know that that when you write a book, it's a whole other thing, having it out in the world and quite exposing. So thank you for that kind reception. I appreciate it. And home. I think in my 20s, I gave up on the idea of home, and I spiritualized the idea of homelessness or rootlessness, maybe I should say, because thank the Lord, I've always had a roof over my head and somewhere to keep my stuff. Heard that as one definition. But I didn't feel invested in a place or particularly known by a community anywhere. And I thought that was super spiritual of me, that I was kind of like Abraham or something, just willing to like pull up my tent pegs and trot off wherever God wanted me to go. But I was wriggling out of often the fact that God asks us to actually stay, and it's harder sometimes to be somewhere small and local for a long time where people know you to an uncomfortable degree. Eugene Peterson is one of my absolute favourite authors, next to you, of course, Simon. And he talks about just small faithfulness over the long haul, or one of his book titles is A Long Obedience in the Same Direction. And just knuckling down and digging in. And we don't always know that we'll be somewhere for very long, but I think I've learnt that even if I don't know, that what I'm called to do is to put my roots down, and that's scary and painful if you think you might be pulled up, but I really do think it's a basic human need to make home, and it's a good thing. It's of God. I don't think God is asking us to wait like we're in a waiting room for heaven. He's to be found here, and he's to be found now, and our home is in him, but our home is also a really physical and practical and everyday kind of a thing too.
Hey folks, I hope you're enjoying the podcast. I'm loving the response we're getting from across the world. It's just wonderful to see how encouraging and inspiring it is being and hitting the spot. Listen, if you are being blessed by it, I'd love it. Basically, this happens under the auspices of our ministry, Great Lakes Outreach, which works in the poorest and the hungriest country in the world, which is Burundi. We're having an incredible impact in the toughest of circumstances. We want to carry on supporting those local folks doing a great job. So if you wanted to, greatlakesoutreach.org/inspired. You could make a donation there. I'd so appreciate it. Also, it's word of mouth, isn't it? So gossip these podcasts to other people, get them to subscribe, give us a great review. Absolutely wonderful. So grateful to you. So that's greatlakesoutreach.org/inspired. If you want to do a monthly, a couple of quid a month, or a one-off donation, we'd be incredibly grateful. All right, now let's get back to the podcast. Yeah, it's funny, actually, as I'm thinking, we haven't actually dug into when you actually sort of fully gave your life to Jesus. I mean, did you come to him by osmosis, being a Harris in Portugal, or when would you say you appropriated, it wasn't just your parents' faith, it was yours, you laid hold of it for yourself?
There's probably quite a few different moments. It certainly wasn't osmosis. I'm not one to just buy into something because it's around me, so... Mm-hmm. I remember realizing that I had a part in this relationship with God that I needed to be an active participant when I was about 4. Mm-hmm. So I, did an official little prayer at that point with my mum at bedtime. When I was 10 or 11, I was getting pretty fed up of the amount of flack I was getting for being a Christian at school. And I felt that it wasn't worth it because it at that point felt very dry and dusty and related to my parents and not me. And I think even quite young children can set a course, can't they? And when I think back to that, I have a slight kind of cold sweat because what swerved me back into a faith journey was some visitors who were passing through and to a big conference in Lisbon and took me to the beach and prayed for me to be filled with the Holy Spirit. I had no idea what that meant, no framework for what happened next, which was that I began to pray in tongues and got completely flattened on my back on the beach and laughed for about 2.5 hours just because I was completely bubbling over with God's presence in me and around me and a feeling of his love for me. And
beautiful.
I think that slightly unnerved my poor parents because I was quite zealous at that point onwards and thought they needed more of the Holy Spirit and things like that. So so that was another big point. And then I had a bit of a teenage rebellion, wanting to experiment with some, I don't know, nothing new under the sun is there, but in my gap year. So I was in a relationship with somebody at that point, and when it began to get serious, I confessed that I had this Christian bit to me, and he was so horrified and shocked that it kind of pushed me back into exploring what it meant and with him, and eventually just realizing that God was asking me to choose between him and this guy. And so that was a big putting my stake in the ground moment. And that was another point, I guess. But at that point I was like, well, I clearly do believe it. So no more kind of waffling now. My commitment went really deep at that point. So, yeah.
Fascinating. And so you married Sean, you married a vicar. You probably never thought, like Lizzie, Lizzie's a vicar's daughter. She's like, I'm never going to be a vicar's wife. But you've ended up as vicar's wife. And I know that's...
He wasn't a vicar at the time, I hasten to add.
Okay.
He was a youth worker, which I could just about live with.
Right. Anyway, and you're a great team. So how's that journey been?
Well, there's two things there, aren't there? Being married to a vicar and being married to Sean. Well, Sean, he's great. He's come from a very, very different background to mine, pretty traumatic childhood. he came to faith in a big way when he was 17, and he's a rough diamond. He's not had anything handed to him.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually really love that about him. There's nothing contrived or in him that he hasn't worked really hard with God to be and to do. So yeah, marriage, we've been married nearly 20 years. That'll be 20 years in January. Mm-hmm. And I'm very proud that we're still married. I think marriage is hard work and amazing, and a lot of people don't manage the long haul. So I'm really proud that our commitment is stronger than ever, and we still get into conversations that make us miss our exit on the motorway regularly. And we still get into fits of laughter that can make me splurt food out of my nose. And yeah. So yeah, marriage is good.
That's great.
Good. And the girls are great. We've got Alexa, who's 15, and Karis is 12. No, I'm very, very grateful to God for that. Being a vicar's wife, I've been a great disappointment, I think, to some people, because I think we're in a moment of still transitioning from when vicar's wife was a job title. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, the way I see myself is a very active and committed member of the church, along with everyone else.
Yeah. And you're committed, but you're juggling a full-on job, aren't you? And now I'm talking to you after an 8-day stretch of being absolutely knackered. So let's talk about that and your role at A Rocha. Was that inevitable, having been born into the family that you were, or tell us how you ended up there?
Okay, well, no, not inevitable at all. I think that A Rocha, coming as it did out of our family, I needed distance from it to grow up in some ways, just as you need to distance and reform a new relationship with parents. I needed to do that with A Rocha. So in all honesty, I'm fairly surprised to find myself here. Mm-hmm. As you know, 2.5 years ago, my parents were in a car accident, and my mum was killed along with the A Rocha chief executive, Chris, and his wife, Susanna. And my dad was in intensive care and in an induced coma and intubated for 10 days. And my siblings and I, we went straight out to South Africa to accompany Dad out of that. It's amazing that he made it. And we were also there with Colin Jackson, who had lived with us in Portugal when I was growing up, so very much like a brother to me, and he leads A Rocha Kenya. Right. And a guy called Murray Tessendorf, who leads A Rocha South Africa. And we were together in this tight group for 2 weeks, day in, day out, and just hearing, being around those two and hearing about their work again, and just realising the beauty of what my mum had been involved in at the beginning. I guess I fell in love with it again and decided that I wanted back in somehow, and I was thinking I would just volunteer, or, I don't know. I hadn't really got my head around what I was planning to do, but I wanted to be involved again. So fast forward, came back to my job in the UK, and there was a lot of change going on, and my role was going in a direction that didn't fit me at all. Mm-hmm. So it was quite stressful, to be honest, that, and with the grief and supporting my dad, and COVID was starting around then. So I quit without anything to go to, and then it turned out that A Rocha had no comms person. So yeah, very surprising to find myself here, but very right. I think very right. Feels very right.
I know it's very tender in terms of your journey of grief. A friend of mine's very recently lost his daughter to cancer, and he talks about grief work. Where are you at in that journey, that process?
Yeah, that's a good phrase. I decided early on just to strap myself in and go where it took me. I mean, it's amazing to reach your 40s and not have experienced grief to any great degree. I'm really mindful of the privilege that I have in that, and most of the world is much more acquainted with sudden and untimely death. So I don't feel special in this experience. I feel that I've been protected, and so just to put that in first. But it was very shocking. We didn't have any concept of mum dying first. Like, we always expected my dad to die early because he has this medical condition, and mum was very, very worried about it. So sort of talked a lot about how and what and why she was going to manage after dad died. So very shocking. Part of the work of it at the beginning, I think, was just rewiring my brain so that I could understand what had happened. And it still shocks me sometimes. I still have these little thought routes that take me a minute to edit.
Yeah.
So yeah, things like Mother's Day can be quite painful. And then there's also things that you can't see coming, like a smell or an object that you see and suddenly it will bring a thought back. But I have realised that time really does help. I think, again, like metaphors really help me. And I would say the best metaphor I have for this is it's like labour, but it's going in the opposite direction. So it started with this almost overwhelming pain that was fairly unrelenting. You'd have these little numb periods of time, like an hour or two in each day, and then the rest of it was just pain. But then as time has gone on, there's longer periods of time where life feels quite normal, but the pain when it comes is still quite brutal.
Yeah.
And I've thought a huge amount about heaven and about, I've just been scouring the Bible for hints and signs of what I can hope in. And all of the language is around things going from temporary to permanent and a bit sort of waffly and unclear to really clear, really solid. And things going from broken and painful to whole and fit for purpose, fit for eternity. And so I'm holding on to that. I really do believe that Mum is safe, held in God, and made whole and joyful, full of so much joy, and that I'll be with her again, and we will both be with Jesus. And yeah, so I am full of hope. I also think the picture is that that we'll all be raised together at the same time, and that God will come to earth and heaven and earth will be undivided. So that's a great mystery that I can't wrap my head around. But I just have this huge peace that she's held.
Yeah.
And that she's kind of done her race. She's done her race really well. And I now need to do my race.
Yeah. I mean, I've thought a lot about heaven because of living in a war zone and expecting to die. And one of my favourite quotes is Dallas Willard, because I think some people think of heaven in a very sort of abstract and, almost a negative way, almost, sort of singing on the clouds with your harps, and that seems horrifically dull.
Save us from that, hey?
Yeah, so I love this Dallas Willard in The Divine Conspiracy. This quote I've often shared, but he goes, "We should not think of ourselves as destined to be celestial bureaucrats involved eternally in celestial administrivia. that would be only slightly better than being caught in an everlasting church service. No, we should think of our destiny as being absorbed in a tremendously creative team effort with unimaginably splendid leadership on an inconceivably vast plane of activity, with ever more comprehensive cycles of productivity and employment. This is the eye hath not seen, neither ear heard, that lies before us in the prophetic vision of Isaiah 64:4. I love that. And that is where we will get with a new heaven and a new earth, and some things we can be more more sure of. I mean, we haven't really got a clue, have we? But it's interesting. Even more, just relating that back to your work, because your work is very much engaged in. It's Christian Aid's motto: we believe in life before death. And I think some Christians are just involved in life after death and saving people from hell, whatever. And A Rocha's work is very much engaging in the here and now and trying to provide a hopeful narrative, isn't it? And people not giving up. So tell us a bit more about that and how you're involved.
Well, we understand our work as worship. Ultimately, we are, in the sense that what we do is in response to the glory of God and the love of God, and reflecting back to God that we are doing our best to honour what he has said he cares for and he loves and he is invested in. And that is ultimately a really hopeful endeavour, because we're not saving the world. The world has a saviour. God will save it and he will restore it. And the picture is pretty bleak. So I think we're quite unique in being hopeful in that space. And just doing what we do out of obedience and out of worship, not because it's going to make the difference between a livable habitat and one that causes extreme suffering and death. So that, I think that's how I would explain it. Yeah, me specifically, A Rocha is so much about fingers in the ground, getting muddy and living in community and all of that COVID has meant that I've just been stuck in my house, my study with my laptop. So I feel like there's a bit of a disconnect there. I'm quite keen to reconnect with the actual work. But funnily enough, I was talking to our chief exec, Simon Stewart, recently about what conservation is. And he said that I was a conservationist. And I realised that was a really profound moment for me. I think I thought that the people who were, planting the indigenous saplings and cleaning out the ponds and whatnot were the conservationists, and that I was amplifying and talking about their conservation work. So I still need to dig into what he meant, but I think what he meant was that the work of conservation needs everybody. And I'm not a scientist. I'm very much on the art side, and I don't really find birds very interesting. Whisper it. But my part is needed too. The storytelling and the speaking out about what needs to be done and what is being done, that's part of it. So I'm claiming that that I am doing conservation here with my laptop. My house.
What would be A Rocha's sort of glory stories, or anything they'd be really proud of as in terms of be it advocacy or transforming an environment? I don't know. What if you're trying to say A Rocha's done this is superb, this has made a difference, what would come to mind?
Yeah, so I mean we've got a lot, because as we've been going for nearly 40 years. But so the original A Rocha Centre in Portugal it was at the time, and it remains the last undeveloped wetland in southern Portugal. It's on a major migration route, so birds going back and forth between Europe and Africa. It's their stop-off point, and it's a headland with two marshes. It's known as the Alva Estuary, and the battle to protect it has been epic, and the pressure from development companies, money, corrupt officials, you it, but that place remains undeveloped, and you can see the difference from space that A Rocha's presence has made there.
Wow.
It's just like, it's stark now because the rest of the Algarve has been kind of stripped bare with little villas and golf courses and marinas, and so it's really, really striking. Similarly, the Amik marshes in Lebanon, the before and after photographs of the restoration there is absolutely stunning. And the amount of biodiversity, the amount of different species that now live happily and flourish in that area of Lebanon is gorgeous. We are involved, leading A Rocha Ghana is leading on the protection of this place called Atiwa Forest, where the Ghanaian government, to pay off debts to China, was planning to allow bauxite mining, which is strip mining. And not only are there untold numbers of endangered species in that forest, but a massive city, something like, I'm going to get the number wrong, but something like 3 million people depend on it for clean water downstream, and the mining would make that toxic. And it's not clean and clear yet, the protection of that forest, but it would have long ago been destroyed without A Rocha's involvement and campaigning and studies of all the things that lived there. There was a brand new monkey found there called the Mangabe monkey. Yeah, so really,
very
really
diverse.
huge. I mean, I could go on, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, listen, I think time is coming to an end, so we'll stop on that. But actually, I was just thinking, you'll get some people on the spectrum, the broad spectrum of Christianity. And thinking back to COP26, for example, there was that church, wasn't it, that had this big placard or sign outside it saying that the world's most urgent need is churches preaching Christ crucified, not climate change. What would you say to those guys?
I mean, it's very reductive, isn't it, to say you can only have one important thing. Yeah, I don't think there's a hierarchy like that. I wouldn't say it's not important to preach Christ crucified. Being a Christian means being shaped into Christ-likeness, and the Bible is very clear that God made the world and loves all of it and cares for all of it. So climate change is a terrible misuse of this beautiful functioning world he made for everyone to live in. It's causing untold harm to people, but also creatures, and I was absolutely horrified by that banner, and I think it's such a shame that it got given so much of a profile, given that churches were by and large really behind the aims of sorry, I'm getting confused because there's another COP on biodiversity this year. COP26, was it? Yeah. So there's always going to be outliers.
Yeah. So just climate change, it is so depressing. Can we finish? Last question. Just bring your narrative of hope. Go for it.
Oh, my narrative of hope is Jesus. That's it. Beginning and end and middle. Yeah, he's where it's at. He's who I cling to, and I think we'd be absolutely lost without him. And the fact that he was resurrected in a physical body with his scars, but fully physical, is a massive, resounding endorsement of this world and its longevity and its value. So that's why I'm hopeful. He's not given up on us. He won't.
Amen. Well, listen, it's been a real pleasure. Is there anything you want to plug before we clear off?
Well, if it's not cheeky, I want to tell people that my mum always wanted to write a book, and she didn't manage it, but we found in her study after she died a lot of writing, which I have transcribed and finished off. So she and I have a co-authored book coming out in September, which is called A Place at the Table. And it's about hospitality and belonging and community. And I'm very proud. I'm very proud of her for being published. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, we'll put that in the blurb. I'll put links to A Rocha and Home, your book on Home. And Jo, it's been a real pleasure. I love your integrity, your honesty, your clear thinking, the depth, and for being very real. So God bless you so much. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
So, folks, it's profoundly stirring, challenging. It's making me want to reflect more on a whole range of issues. So I really appreciate that time. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you've enjoyed it, please give us a decent, even more than a decent, a great review on Spotify, iTunes. And if you want to be in touch with me, simongilbo.com or any of the social media platforms. In the meantime, have a great week. I want to thank Adam Thomas Deere for the editing and Mike Sandeman for the mixing. God bless you loads. Toodaloo.